We heard about you treating some of the men during their lunch hour. We think maybe we can carry the plan a little further.
Frankly, that was what I hoped you had in mind when you called me. You see, for the past several months, I've been doing quite a good deal of research and study on the subject of, well, I call it industrial medicine. I've been trying to find out what's already been done by others. It's been most revealing, and I might add, at times, a bit discouraging. As I said, the idea isn't exactly new. People have been trying to do something about industrial medicine for hundreds of years. Only, for the most part, very little progress has been made.
But now the states are passing these workmen's compensation laws. That takes care of it, doesn't it?
No, not exactly, Mr. Gregg. Industrial medicine stresses the preventive side of sickness and accidents in the factories, the mines, and the mills.
Dr. Randall, as far as we're concerned here in this plant, just what would you propose, specifically?
I've worked out a rather complete program. I think this would be a good start. First, the program would include a complete physical examination for every employee, a permanent and well-equipped first aid station in the plant. Third, there should
Just
also
a minute. You know, we're running a factory here, not a hospital. I'm afraid your ideas are a little too ambitious for us, Doctor.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I only...
Now, hold on, Sam. One or two of the suggestions you have here are well worth considering, Doctor. In other words, I think we can go along at least part way with you. Anyway, for a start. Now, here's what I suggest. Beginning next Monday morning, you'll make regular calls here at the plant. Say from 10 to 12. And we'll fix up a place for you to work. And I think there's merit in this idea of the first aid station. Don't you, Sam?
Well, it might work out as a good investment at that. Save a lot of production time and keep the men on the job.
And as far as examinations are concerned, well, we'll talk about that later. What do you say, Doctor?
All I can say is it's a big step in the right direction. And now, gentlemen, if you'll excuse me, I have a few calls to make.
Of course. Good day, Doctor.
Good day.
Doctor? You know, I just got an idea. There might be some advantages in this idea of physical examinations at that. At least for new employees.
I'm glad you think so.
Sure. A physical examination would weed out a man like Harris in the beginning. If they're unfit and can't do the work, why, let them get a job someplace else. Save us a lot of grief.
Well, I don't think that's quite what the doctor or I had in mind. Anyway, I think we'll adopt the pre-employment examination plan and give it a try. Better call the doctor and tell him we've decided on examinations, too.
Not too much dry mustard for Dad, Ken.
Yeah, I know, and not too much vinegar. Well, if I do say so myself, it's just the way Dad likes it. Say, darling, you know, this is really a celebration tonight. Old man Duncan accepted my ideas. Well, some of them anyway. I begin making regular calls at the factory on Monday.
Oh, darling, you're wonderful.
They even decided to try pre-employment physical examination. First, they wouldn't go for that part at all. Couldn't see the advantages.
Well, tell me, Dr. Randall, just what are the advantages of physical examinations for the employees?
Why, gentlemen, they're obvious. In the first place, they protect the worker from himself. In other words, some people have ailments they don't even suspect. In that case, I'll advise them to go to their own doctors for treatments. But that's only one of the advantages. The examination also protects fellow workers from communicable diseases and so forth. But it's just as important to get people placed on jobs they're physically capable of doing. This way, we can make allowances for anybody with a physical handicap. Not just put them on any old job.
At least it's the ideal way.
Well, it's more than that. Seriously, Martha, I think it's a practical way to cut down on sickness and accidents due to putting some poor fellow on the wrong kind of a job. If a fellow's healthy, he's happy. And if a man's happy in his job, then...
That's Dad. Now, Ken, whatever you do, don't talk about your industrial medicine during dinner.
Okay, sweet, I won't start an argument.
Kenneth?
Yes, Dad?
I had a phone call this afternoon. It was meant for you.
Well, that's not unusual, Dad. We often get our calls mixed.
This was Sam Gregg at the factory.
Oh, well, he probably wanted
Won't
to
you
know
have
about...
some more coffee,
Huh?
Ken?
Oh, no, thanks, Mom.
I gather from what he said, you decided against my advice. You're going to be Kenneth Randall, the factory doctor.
Well, I'll admit it doesn't sound very fancy.
Does that mean that you're giving up your practice? Just as you're beginning to make a name for yourself?
Certainly not. I'm merely going to expand. I'll only be at the factory for a few hours each morning.
Expand in a factory? What about your regular patients? You can hardly expect them to come to a doctor who's out wrapping sore fingers in a factory.
Dad, you don't seem to see what it is I'm trying to do.
It's what you call industrial medicine. Yes, I know. All very fine and noble. But that's not the job for you. Leave it for someone else who can pay the price. You concentrate on being a good surgeon.
What do you mean, pay the price?
Do you think patients like Mrs. Carter Wellman will want a factory doctor for their physician?
Somehow, Dad, I don't care what Mrs. Carter Wellman or anyone like her thinks.
Well, I do. I've spent years making my name an important one in the medical profession. Not only in this town, but throughout the state. I've looked forward to the day when I could hand my practice over to you. And I can't conceive of your deliberately throwing away an opportunity like this for the doubtful security of becoming a salaried member of a factory staff. I can think of no better way for you to tear down the work I've done and besmirch the name I'm proud of.
It's my name too, Dad. And I certainly have no intention of besmirching it in any way. Frankly, I don't see...
Well, you should see. I've told you often enough. If you don't care anything about yourself, your practice, or me, then think of Martha. You owe something to her.
But, Father, I advised Ken to go ahead with what he wanted to do.
Well, you can't be blamed for that. You didn't know. But do you realize what people will say? They'll call him an unethical incompetent who couldn't get by in private practice. That's what they'll say.
There's nothing unethical about the work of a good factory doctor. You know that, Dad.
I do not. In my personal opinion, the whole idea is unethical.
Why? Because you think it's new, untried?
Not only that, you'd be working with some other doctor's patients. You couldn't steal them all away.
That's not fair, Dad. I never interfere with another doctor's private practice, and you know it.
Well, yes. But I'd be the only one who does know it. And here's something else. You or no other man can serve two masters.
What do you mean by that remark?
You can't be loyal to your patients and at the same time be loyal to the man who's paying you a salary. And believe me, there'll be many times when you'll have to make decisions based on that very thing. I'll bet you never even thought about that.
No, I haven't thought about that. I haven't had to.
Well, you will. Mark my words.
But when I do, my first allegiance will be to my patients, to humanity, to the community.
What about Duncan and his stockholders? Don't forget, they'll be paying you. You'll be working for them.
I don't consider it that way.
Well, then on top of everything else, you're not even being honest with yourself.
Oh, yes, I am. By basing my decisions on what's best for my patients, the community, and then the plant, in the long run, I'll do a better job of serving Mr. Duncan and the stockholders. Don't just see, Dad. I sincerely believe in the idea of industrial medicine. Not only in this town, but in thousands of plants all over the country.
Well, that's not up to you to worry about. That's up to the men who run the factory.
No, you're wrong, Dad. Industry wants help. They don't want just surgical repairmen. They want...
Don't say anything more. I can see that you're determined, in spite of my disapproval and disappointment. And nothing I can say will dissuade you.
I'm afraid not.
Well, we can no longer share the same office.
I'm sorry, Dad.
Good night, Martha.
Oh, Dad, you don't mean...
Yes, dear. I'm afraid I do.
And this was only the first of the many bitter disappointments, conflicts, and sacrifices that came to the young doctor who had made his decision to become an industrial physician. Most of the conflict, like the basis of all trouble, was just misunderstanding. In the beginning, the workers themselves resented the physical examinations, and many submitted only under protest. Some of the foremen were short-sighted and resisted special job placement recommendations for handicapped employees. They said,
I'll let him stick to his pill.
We'll run the plant.
We'll place them in or we decide.
and while time solved most of the old problems, it also brought many new ones. For instance, there were cases where a man was suddenly taken sick on the job. Naturally, he was brought to the doctor in the plant.
What happened, boys?
I don't know, he just fainted.
Okay, thanks.
This is when the health record made out at the time of employment examination proved its value as an aid in diagnosis. But here, the illness had no relation to the job. Treatment in this case was outside the responsibility of the plant doctor. This was a case for the employee's private physician, providing the man had one. Yes, this was a problem. Often, too, the man would say,
"You know all about my case, Doc. You're here all the time. You might as well continue the treatment."
I'm afraid not.
and if the doctor did take the case, he was accused of using his factory job to acquire patients for his own private
Right, Doctor.
Call him an unethical incompetent who should never be able to steal them all. You or no other man can serve two masters. That thing I want.
But, Father, I advised Ken to go ahead with what he wanted to do.
But then, gradually, things began to work out a little more smoothly. The workers and their families began to recognize the true benefit and respond to the sincerity, the medical skill, the ethical practices, civic cooperation, and the good judgment of the factory doctor. And even the other doctors in town were beginning to realize that instead of stealing patients away, Dr. Randall was actually sending more and more of them to their own physicians. They gradually realized that Dr. Randall was not only improving the health conditions in the factory, but working for the benefit and general health of the community as a whole. Slowly, the cloud of misunderstanding was beginning to lift. But then came 1914. So, like thousands of other young physicians, Kenneth Randall answered his country's call.
Why, you sure look fine, Doc. And we're mighty glad to have you back.
It goes without saying that I'm glad to be back.
Well, it took the war to make us realize that industrial medicine represents another one of the many major problems that we manufacturers still have to solve. Our medical center was busier than ever before while you were away. Miss McDonald did an excellent job, too. She's a mighty fine nurse.
Yes, she is. I'd like to keep her on. Maybe full time. Because if it's all right with you, Mr. Duncan, from now on, during most of the time I do spend here in the plant, I want to concentrate on the industrial hygiene phase. There's a big job to be done in that field.
Well, there's plenty of time to think about all that later. We'll be glad to pick up just where you left off. You know, just give us a few hours a day like you used to.
Good.
Right now, let's go out to the shop.
Fine.
The boys will be glad to see you.
I'd like to see them.
The World War had been over for 14 years. But as the time slipped by, the only contact between Kenneth Randall and his father had been through Martha's regular visits with the still embittered elder doctor.
Yes, Father. Right after the war, things were a lot different. But as you know, Ken started right in and worked harder than ever in his private practice, as well as in his industrial medicine. Well, things had changed a lot, and he didn't have quite as many difficulties as he'd had in the pre-war days. But there was one thing that still troubled him.
What was that?
Well, shortly after he came back from France, he was interviewing applicants for jobs at the plant. There was a young returned soldier in his office who had come to Ken with a problem.
So you were in the Battle of Le Mans, huh?
Sure was. That's how I picked up this shrapnel.
And, Doc, I just gotta have a job. It seems that every place I go, they hang out the no help wanted sign.
Yes, I know.
Only hiring able-bodied men, they tell me. All I know is factory work. They could use me somewhere, someplace.
I think so. I think perhaps our employment office can arrange something where you'll be sitting down when you work. Now, I've written some instructions on this card. You take this down to the personnel office.
Gee, thanks, Doc.
Good luck, and drop in to see me.
I'm sorry, soldier. Really, I am. You were sitting down along with the others when I was handing out the applications. I didn't notice your cane, or I could have told you then. Could have saved you the bother.
But the doctor said that...
Unfortunately, the doctor doesn't make the rules, nor do I, for that matter. I'm sorry. Keep your chin up, boy. You'll find something besides factory work.
Well, from then on, Ken seemed to feel that rehabilitation of the returned soldier was his personal problem. He did everything possible to help solve it. But at that time, there wasn't very much he could do.
Yes, I know about that.
So then, as the years went by, he spent more and more time working on the problems of his industrial medicine.
And less time on the problems of developing a successful private practice. That was a shame.
No, he was doing something he felt was needed. He used to stay up till all hours of the night studying books on the causes and prevention of occupational diseases, and even books on factory engineering. He spent a lot of time visiting different plants in all parts of the state, studying the health conditions of the workers, taking samples of dust, of oil, bringing them back to his little office laboratory, making chemical analyses, experimenting. Later on, he made speeches and read papers on the history of occupational diseases to gatherings of industrialists and physicians. And Father, Ken has made a success of his life and the work he wanted to do. Why, today he's considered almost an authority on industrial medicine.
But he would have made such a fine surgeon. That's the success I always wanted for Ken.
He is a fine surgeon.
What I mean is, well, with his hands and brain, he could have been... Oh, what's the use of talking?
Father, Ken and I are leaving the city. We're going to move.
And try to build up a practice somewhere else? It's too late for that now. That's positively insane.